Hi, everybody. My name is Doug Kelley, and I am the Dean of Student Activities and Athletics here at Dayton Rehoboth Regional High School. We're very excited, Dr. Azar and I are very excited to start this series off called the Superintendents Roundtable. Now, this is a very interactive type project. It's never been done before as far as I know here at the school. We have behind the camera that you can't see is Mr. Anthony Nardozzi, who is also our executive producer, who will be taking care of both Doc and myself throughout this series. This series is going to be very, very interesting. This is going to be a transparent series where we're going to be able to show the community of Dayton and Rehoboth and surrounding communities, because we're going to reach out to a lot of different folks. We're going to talk about the roofing project. We're going to talk about our solar panels. We're going to talk about maybe academic scheduling. How do we get to academic scheduling? Sports, special guests, other superintendents in the area that Dr. Azar would be kind enough to bring in, who he's friendly with. I also think we're going to look at school committee members, if we can get a couple of those folks to come on, kind of give the towns a little bit, what's going on over at the high school. We're hoping to get up on our roof. We're hoping to get a chance for you to bring our camera crew up top and see what's really going on, what's really ticking here at Dayton Rehoboth. We call it the DR difference. We'll get back to that in a little bit. As you can see, to my left, your right, Dr. Anthony Azar. Doc, this is going to be exciting. This is going to be exciting. And we are going to talk today about, this is Dr. Azar's idea. We're going to talk today about how do we get to calling a snow day. Doc, it's all yours. How do you do it? It's a mystery.
It is a mystery, Doug. First of all, thank you for setting off in motion our first roundtable discussion. And one of the interesting parts of and responsibilities of being a superintendent is based upon Mass General Law, is that the superintendent is the only person in a community that can call school off. And it is quite daunting, to say the least, because it's something that you don't learn in school. As you mentioned, I am a doctor. I've been going to school for a very, very long time. I've been involved in many roundtable discussions myself, but no one really prepares you for making that decision, because people have to understand that when you make the decision for no school, a lot goes into it. And you ask me, what exactly goes into it? Well, what happens that we typically, when I say we, there's a team of us that come up with a decision.
And so who's your team? When you do it, who are these folks?
One of the goals that we have is that you always surround yourself with solid people, because that makes you as superintendent look that much better.
Right.
So the people that I rely on very, very spontaneously before a snowstorm or any kind of weather event that takes place, my business administrator, Catherine Antonellis, facilities administrator, which is Dave Nappy, and then people on the ground, such as Tom Ferry, the highway superintendent in Dayton.
So you're actually talking to the folks that are already out in the storm.
You got it.
Okay.
And of course, Mike Costello, the superintendent of highway in Rehoboth. So these individuals, Mr. Costello and Mr. Perry, they're out there from the get-go. As the first flakes, before the first flakes even start, they start gathering their information and their data. Catherine, my business administrator, then taps into both of those individuals to find out what's happening. Are we going to be able to plow the roads? And to the best of my knowledge, fact-finding, of course, that we'll have some fact-finders as well, is that in Rehoboth we have approximately 166 miles of roadway. In Dayton, I believe it's closer to 60, 70 miles of roadway.
There's 166 miles just in the town of Rehoboth.
Rehoboth, that's correct. And as everyone knows, we don't have sidewalks. So that means that every one of our 2,863 students, they're all assigned buses. And therefore the buses, now typically not everyone takes the bus, which even presents more of an issue because we have more people on the road. Young drivers as well here at the high school. And what we encourage folks to do, particularly on snow days, is to utilize the buses, because that's the safest way to get to school.
But you know the kids.
You never know.
I got my license.
I got my license. We're ready to roll. But I want to stress one very specific point here, and I think it's very important for the parents to understand, guardians of all our students. ultimately the decision maker as to whether or not your child goes to school or not goes to school is you, the parent.
Right.
So therefore, if people are waiting to see what we're going to do, but if at any moment that during these snowstorms or these weather events that parents feel as though it's unsafe for their child to come to school, well then you're the final person to make that decision. However, you do wait for a decision to be made. Now there are opportunities where anyone can call the day off, because we'll have weather reports the day before or the night before or the weekend before that come Monday there's going to be 18 inches of snow,
and we've been caught
at daybreak. And therefore we try to make the call prior to the morning of, and that gives folks an opportunity to make sure they have their daycare and whatever else they need.
And here come the calls if the weather system slides 15, 20 miles.
Exactly.
And it's a tough call. That's got to be a tough call.
So those of you who know the area geographically, you could have a weather event in southern Rehoboth, and northern Rehoboth, which is closer to Attleboro, there's not a flake around.
Yeah.
So we have to and if the weather is such that we have to call school off, it impacts the entire district.
And so, okay, let's take that. So as you get information coming in from local meteorologists, your guys out on the street, it hasn't even started to snow yet.
That's correct.
Not a flake.
Not a flake.
But they're saying
the break of dawn,
12 to 18 inch, whatever they're saying.
Right.
Talk a little bit about, so our own folks here,
Yes.
our custodians here, down in the elementary and
That's
middles,
right.
they got to start getting ready to plow too. So if it starts snowing at midnight, what time are these guys coming in?
That's correct. So that's where we rely on Dave Nappy, our facilities manager.
Right.
And the input that he has is instrumental in getting his folks and the crews at all 5 buildings, 3 campuses, the Diane, the Rehoboth, and the high school, ready to plow out. Because even if our parking lots and areas are all cleared out, we still rely on Mr. Costello and Mr. Perry to give us a bird's eye view of what's happening in the Dayton and the Rehoboth towns.
Right.
And under those situations, we have to all be in sync. So there are times where we might discuss a delay. So
We saw that last year, last couple of years.
Right. So Mr. Ferry and Diane will share with us that maybe an hour delay will be helpful. We can get the roadways cleared out in time. Rehoboth, Mr. Costello will think their input, because we rely on their input. And then through that, Catherine Antonellis, she is monitoring several of the weather stations as well to see what's coming in. And then I gather all that information as well. So typically on a prospective snow day, we start our day probably closer to 3:15, 3:30, 3:45 in the morning.
You'd have to.
That's where it starts.
Yeah.
Because if we don't make the call, no school, by at least 5:30 to 5:45 in the a.m., then thereafter school's on, because buses are rolling.
Buses, that's what I was going to say.
Buses are rolling around 5:30.
Right.
So we have to make the call before 5:30.
Right.
So
That makes
sometimes
sense.
parents get a little concerned, like, why didn't you call this the night before?
Right.
Well, as you mentioned, Doug, earlier, that weather pattern might shift.
Yeah, and often does.
And it often does.
Yeah.
So predictability-wise, it's very difficult to try to nail that down in the specific time where school begins. And with that, we start thinking about how many snow days are there. Now, if you recall, a year ago or thereabouts, around this time, we had a hurricane.
Yeah, and you burned a couple days.
Right in October.
I remember.
In October, we burned 2 days right there.
Right.
And then going forward, I think, and it was a kind of a difficult season to call to a certain extent, but I believe there were 3 more days, so a total of 5. But many of our area communities also had the 5, and some of them had 7 and 8, because the weather pattern in Dayton and Taunton. Now Taunton gets a little bit trickier.
That 495
the 495 belt,
Yeah.
exactly. So sometimes people will write into social media. Seekonk was out, but why did Dayton Rehoboth have school? Or why was Somerset, Berkeley out?
Because they're right there next to each other.
They're right there, exactly. So if we have a weather pattern in northern Rehoboth, and the weather pattern's not the same in Diane, we have to make decisions based on student safety.
Right.
Are the buses going
Which
to
is
get...
that's your paramount. That's all it is. It's all about safety.
Right. So there are some things that to try to negate the extra days at the end of the school year.
Yeah.
As many folks know out there, our school buildings, most of them are not air conditioned. Mm-hmm. So as you get in the latter days of June, now be mindful of the fact that June 30th is the cutoff day. We can't go past June 30th because it's a new fiscal year.
Yeah.
So that's why folks are scrambling around towards the end of the year. But to make that call of no school, that has been probably the most fundamental question that I've gotten in the last 4 years of being superintendent here.
Now, how many days? I know this answer, but for Falconville out there,
Falconville.
How many days do we have? Because this has always been a mystery before we start having to make them up. I hear this every year.
Right. So at the end of the year, there's always built in 5 days at the end of the school year.
Okay.
So typically, if we get out on June 18th or 19th,
right,
we have built in 5 days because of the weather here in New England. It's unpredictable, and we have to make sure that we're on par with those days. But then what happens is, as we get into depending on the severity of the weather and the weather patterns, we could see 7 or 8 days possibly.
Yeah.
But as we get closer, there are some remedies that other communities have been utilizing, such as going to school on a Saturday, losing vacation time.
How do you feel about that?
Well, quite frankly, I think that we've done well. The team that we've put in place with Mr. Ferry, Mr. Costello, Catherine Antonellis, Dave Nappy, the team. Yeah. Because as you know, the road folks, the superintendents of the highway, they're out there 24/7. They're folks. And they know precisely, and the viewing audience would know all too well that some of these roads in Rehoboth and Dayton, even on a clear day, are very difficult to maneuver.
Right.
So when we make that call, like I said, we want to make sure that student safety is paramount, but we also know that we have to have school.
So we're in school. Let's take this scenario. We're in school. And here it comes. They said it wasn't going to start until noon. At 8 o'clock, we start seeing it come down, and it's coming down at a pretty good clip. And you got to cancel halfway through the day. Mm-hmm. We call it the ripple effect in the athletic department, the ripple effect for parents that are at work that have their children, especially our younger ones, down in the elementary and middle school. All of a sudden, this becomes a real tough call for you, I would imagine, because you're in the middle of our academic day.
Here we go. Exactly. So pretty much everything stops at the central office. What we have to do is get in touch with our the same crew. Basically, Catherine comes in, Dave comes in. We're in constant contact with Mr. Costello, Mr. Ferry in the Rehoboth area. The key to dismissing school early is to make sure that this storm is not at dismissal time, because it doesn't give the road crews enough time to clear the roads. Right. So if which compounds everything. Absolutely.
Because the buses are literally driving
in the storm.
In 3 or 4 inches of snow at the beginning of any storm.
Correct. So if we call, let's say for instance, there were times last year, for instance, that we were trying to calculate, because now remember, dismissal at the high school is much different than the elementary school. So the window of opportunity is rather large. Yeah. From 151 dismissal at the high school to 330 or thereabouts.
Could be 6 inches.
Exactly. So one of the things that we ask our folks on the Diane and the Rehoboth side is that is it better to keep the kids in school and not cancel and have a normal dismissal time, because it gives the road crews enough time to clear the roads so the buses and the kids can get home safely. Right. So that's another consideration. The other consideration is this, that we come to school and we know that the snow is going to stop pretty quickly. And then we have a window, sort of saying, to either cancel school early, right, or go to the end of the school day, because they'll give the road crews a chance to do that. But then there's other opportunities where we're in school, the snow's not going to start until around dismissal time.
Here we go.
Here we go.
Here we go.
Because then at around 10:30, 11 o'clock, while the kids are now come in, we're credited with a half a day.
Yeah.
So then what we do is we make a decision pretty quickly that, okay, we're going to send kids home. We did that last year.
I remember
it was
that.
a windstorm, if you recall.
Yeah.
And we got the
trees
kids,
were coming down.
Trees
all
were coming down.
It was
We got the
crazy.
kids out. We got everybody out safely.
And power too, right?
And
When
power.
people were
We
losing
lost power. We lost
Yeah.
power here at the high school.
Yeah.
In our preschool, but we were able to get everybody out and safe before the brunt of it hit, because what we were doing was we were following and tracking the storm, where we saw that the storm was going to hit right around dismissal time. So we had to get the kids and the faculty out of here before dismissal time. And we were very successful in that.
And we have, you brought it up in that last segment, that we have the littlest ones here too.
That's
now.
correct. Right.
So now, and they're in the back of the school, and we got the buses out front. We've got 2 sets of buses in the Dighton and the Rehoboth entrance, but we've got our precious littlest ones in the back with mums and dads trying to fight their way through to get to the back of the school. So that's got to be a concern.
Well, it was actually that was one of the reasons why we have moved the preschool back to their elementary schools,
which was great.
It's something that wasn't the only reason, but that was significant enough. Obviously, the Palmer River preschool is there now, and as the modulars, and we'll have a story about the modulars at Dighton Elementary School as they come on board, and the preschool is now at Dighton Elementary on another series. That's correct. We'll show that as well.
Right.
But it was very important to move those the preschool kids out of here because of that. Trying to the parents trying to traverse their way to get their kids,
and they're grabbing these little round children that are covered in mittens,
snow,
and
hats,
hats, trying to get them safely into the car, and it's just incredible to watch the school. I've been in the school for 28 years, but now that I'm on this side of the fence, so to speak, watching it unfold on a day like that is joyous for some of our kids and maybe some of the staff, but I watch you guys up here, and it's anything but.
It's
you
intense.
Guys are flying
it's intense. We're flying because then we have to communicate out to parents, and we do have the one call. We do have means to communicate that, but not everyone gets those messages. So we got to make sure that everybody's on the same page when we calculate when we're going to dismiss. But there were. I'm sorry.
No. Finish that.
Well, I was going to say that. Because of the uncertainty of the weather patterns in New England, we're presented with these issues. And one of the things that I think you were going to mention to me was about, okay, so if you have more than 5 days or 6 days,
what happens?
What happens, right? So there has been some movement. It started in New Hampshire, and it's called the blizzard bags. And there are some communities in Massachusetts that have actually gone to what is known as the blizzard bags. And the blizzard bags basically gives us the opportunity to count a snow day as a school day.
For kids and staff?
Well,
how does that work?
Well, that's an interesting point. There's been some pros and cons to the blizzard bag. It hasn't caught on very well yet in Massachusetts.
This isn't carved in stone.
It's not carved in stone. This is just something we're going to talk about, and will lead us to our first opinion piece, where folks can actually email us their opinions on this and what they think of it.
Yeah.
But the blizzard bag is something that, as I was mentioning, started in New Hampshire, probably because of the number of snow days they must have, and basically it's an assignment for the kids. And the kids bring the assignment home, and they have to work on it at home.
All levels?
All levels.
Elementary, middle,
and high school. That's correct. And according to the rules and regulations of a blizzard bag in Massachusetts, that 80% of your students have to be working on the blizzard bag in order for the district to get credit for that school day. How do you measure something like that? So there are some ways to do that through the internet, but then that begs the question: what is the power?
Who's
monitoring
right.
it? And if you don't reach 80%, all those kids who did all their work they have to come to school on whatever days are being made up.
So there's some territory we have to look
Absolutely,
at.
some bumps in the road before we start thinking about that. Now, the other piece is that for teachers to get credited for the day, they have to be accessible to their students. So if the students have questions about the Blizzard bag and the assignments, they have to be able to be available for the kids to ask them questions.
So this is like being in college. I know my daughter comes home from school. They're shut down for a couple 3 days.
Sure.
Their professors actually, they're looking at each other on the on the laptop.
They're Skyping.
They got their feet up in front of the fire, but they're still doing all their work. They're getting their academics in.
Right, and then of course somebody would question, well, what happens if you lose power?
Right.
What happens if you lose your internet connection?
Right.
What happens? And those are the pieces that have to be ironed out. Mm-hmm. But I will tell you that the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents are putting a study committee together to take a look at the pros and the cons of the Blizzard bag, because that's something we're going to ask the audience.
So this is becoming quite a bit of a fad. It's becoming something that's
serious.
That
way, but what I've noticed with the research right now is that the New Hampshire folks, and then it kind of trickled down into Massachusetts, hasn't really caught on as well as people thought it would be. And I think it has a lot to do with individuals who don't have access to the internet. And the other fundamental piece about snow days, Doug, snow days are interesting because these sometimes are the only days that families have to actually be together.
Imagine
that. Not to say that families aren't together, on the weekends or doing family things, but
it's a whole different world.
Hey, everybody's you're in the house. Yeah. This is it. The governor possibly is called the National Guard out. Yeah. No one can travel on the roadways. So basically, it's a matter of cleaning cars off, shoveling, building the snow people.
It's exciting for a day or two.
Exactly.
And then all of a sudden,
sledding.
Let's get going.
Right. As you get into the first day, everyone understands it. But then those remarkable storm events.
But for those of us that are old enough for the 1978 blizzard.
1978, yes, Doug. I believe I was 18 years old at the time. And the only way we got out of our house was through the sliding glass door in the backyard.
Yeah, everything came to a stop.
Came to a standstill for over a week and a half. For many of us. Yeah. It's good that we haven't seen that since that time, but you never know.
I don't know if we will. I think nowadays, and you may disagree, but I think the way we move snow here in Dighton, Rehoboth, and I live in Mansfield, same type of thing, mm-hmm. where we've got the equipment now, we've got the Doppler radar now. I mean, we can literally pinpoint within a few minutes of when it's going to start.
Exactly. And even at that, sometimes as folks at home know, that even our meteorologists don't always get it right.
Right.
And if they're getting much better, but if we're relying on what they're doing, because where else do we get our information? We're not meteorologists by any means. We do track the storms. We do have the Doppler radar. We do have different ways of getting that information. But it's very important for people at home to know that a snow day or a weather event day, because it was a hurricane a year ago or so, that we lost 2 days, that is it something that kids work on something, or is it something that teachers have to be accessible? Because many of our teachers also have children who probably are in school as well, not necessarily our district, but those districts might be off as well. Yeah. And someone has to take care of their children. So maybe they don't have accessibility. But I think that with our show winding down here, Doug, that I'd like to share with the audience this email that we have. If you wanted to share that with them, and they could...
Yeah, Ryan McGonigal set us up nicely. If you folks are interested in kind of helping Dr. Azar and myself continue this series, we're asking that if you go to roundtable@drregional.org, we'll be able to get some of your emails and some of your concerns, some of your suggestions, maybe even on some of these, on the Blizzard bags and stuff of that nature. But if you go to roundtable@drregional.org, it'll give us a way to pilot the forwarding series. So I think next month, where it's going to be November, hopefully our executive producer here, Mr. Nardozzi, will get us up and running soon enough. We're going to try to do this once a month. And we'll go right up until the end of school, and maybe even in the summertime if you and I are both in the school anyway. So we might be able to do that. But I do appreciate your time, Dr. Azar. Always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
It's going to be a lot of fun, Doug.
It's going to be fun. We're going to have some fun with this, and this is just the beginning of a long, long series. So thank you all, and go home and study.